Excellencies, respected ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Apologies for not being with you today physically due to personal circumstances which I couldn't avoid. May I express gratitude and appreciation to the host who invited me to this esteemed conference, a conference I wish that will become a resounding success. Now, you might ask, what prompted me to choose this topic for this conference? The answer is actually is another question which was posed to me after publishing the 1001 Inventions book some time ago. And the question was, were there any women in Muslim civilization who contributed in fields other than being housewives, fields such as science? In reality, this issue is not that these women didn't exist. It's that such information is actually quite rare. Now, in fact, even information on men's contributions in science is also rare. There is a blind spot as presented in school STEM subjects like science, technology, engineering, and maths textbooks, and textbooks for university science and engineering courses. This is part of a wider general lack of information on the contributions of non-European societies to science, technology, and medicine. Now, this presentation addresses this huge gap in public knowledge on women of science, medicine, and leadership in Muslim civilization. The picture that emerges when these gaps are filled will actually redefine the narrative that has been constructed around women in Muslim civilization. In modern times, we've seen the rise of ideologies and movements which have sought to bring women to the forefront of discussions and highlight the agency and power in Western society. But the onus is on Muslims as bastions of once a thriving Muslim civilization to uncover the fascinating story of women in Muslim civilization. Over time, due to the marginalization of the study of women in a niche academic circle, women as the subject of academic research became popularized through the paradigm of empowering women through prevalent Western ideologies. However, Muslim societies can no longer relegate the study of women's history to a niche academic circle and let it become hijacked by feminist agendas of women's liberation, which celebrate a morally contrasting and deeply un-Islamic ethos or way of life as a model for women's progression. I'm afraid the longer the Muslims do not address the elephant in the room, the more entrenched that false narrative on women in Muslim civilization become, and the more dire the consequences will be in our modern world. Muslim women are already increasingly looking to emulate their Western counterparts, and ignorance of the remarkable women of Muslim civilization who paved the path for future generations has meant that to fit in today's social environment, many Muslim women have no role model other than to follow that of the Western model. Now, in this presentation, I shall try to expand on I'll try to expand on recent works on the subject, and hopefully present a prosopographic study for some selected women from the fields of science, medicine, and literature and management. A recent study carried out by the Foundation for Science, Technology, and Civilization, which is our foundation, has discovered that there exists a blind spot in the syllabus of most STEM textbooks and popular books. To demonstrate this gap, you only need to list the names of scientists and inventors from some typical recent publications and spread them along a timeline to discover a gap of more than 1,000 years. there is an unaccounted historical gap that comes between the development of science and inventions across the ages. Now, if you look at, take this, for example, this book that you see, it's a popular book, like a coffee table book, from 1989, and authored by Anthony Feldman and Peter Ford, titled Scientists and Inventors, the people who made technology from the earliest times to present day. Wow. Now, Feldman and Ford jump from Archimedes in 287 BC to Johannes Gutenberg in 1400 CE, followed by Leonardo da Vinci in 1452. Now, this is really incredible to actually show a summary of what is available in terms of names of scientists and inventors and so on across the age in these books and in the popular books. This is the graph that actually shows a gap between the Greeks and Romans on the left-hand side and the Renaissance, the Industrial Revolution, modern day civilization on the other side. So in between, there is this sort of the Dark Ages. This gap presents the period between the Greek and the Greek era and the Roman and the European Renaissance. Now, if you fill the gap once populated by contributions from other cultures, it should look like this. The issue becomes more pronounced, actually, when we come to women. Recent books, unfortunately, have not improved in representing more diverse contributions of women across history. Take this book, 2016, published by Rachel Ignotovsky, titled Women in Science, 50 Fearless Pioneers Who Changed the World. It jumps from Hypatia of Alexandria in 400 CE as the first female mathematician to Elena Pescopia in 1678 as the first woman to receive a doctoral degree. Now, if you go to, see, this is it. It shows between 400 and 1678. There's a huge gap. I mean, what happened to the world during? There's no women, unfortunately, that have made any contributions, it seems, to have changed the world. Now, if you take for instance the United Nations Women Interactive Timeline, titled "Women's Footprint in History," it does again. It jumps from Adonis, 400 BC, to 1691 CE, Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz, a Mexican writer nun. So if you again go to a timeline of brief history of women in science, it's developed this time by a respectable body such as Science and Technology Facilities Council, right? Now we see the same gap. It jumps from Hypatia, 350 CE, to Hildegard of Bingen, 1155 CE, who wrote the first book on disease, medicine, and psychology. Now, of course, again, maybe perhaps one goes to a much more popular book, and let us see recently a book, again, 2016, by Kate Pankhurst, entitled Fantastically Great Women Who Changed the World. The list of women featured are all European and American women. Now, this absence leads to spreading a superiority complex amongst Western women, and at the same time, unsurprisingly, widening an inferiority complex amongst women of other cultures. In addition to being airbrushed out of history, Muslim women are wrongly depicted in modern Western media and often appear belittled in the public spotlight. Of course, there are numerous books on Muslim women in history, predominantly written by Orientalists, mostly giving a distorted view of women in the harem and depicting them as objects of pleasure subservient to men. Despite negative portrayals of women in the media and literature, women have historically enjoyed significant rights in Muslim societies. What exasperates derogatory attitudes to the roles that Muslim women play in society is the paucity of literature available. Although some books and papers have debated the position of women in Islam, especially regarding sorry about this. Where are we? I'm sorry, I think we got now, although some books and papers have debated the position of women in Islam, especially regarding inheritance, marriage, and hijab, these have not addressed the role of women in society. Within the last 30 years, however, the role of women, the last 30 years, however, there have been some extensive works in Arabic addressing the subjects of the role of women in history based on primary sources. Now, if you look at this, these three books, they really are very interesting. The first one is by Abd al-Halim Abu Shaqqa, entitled Women Emancipation During the Prophet's Lifetime. It was first published in Arabic, 6 volumes by Dar al-Qalam in Kuwait in 1990. This book caused much debate and discussion between traditionalists and modernists. In fact, in some countries it was even prohibited, but now they are all okay. And it's available in all Arab countries. It has recently been published in an abridged series and translated by Adil Salahi, Cube Publishing. And what I meant is in English language, and published in by Cube Publishing in the UK in December 2021. Now, the other one about this book, although a significant contribution in the contemporary field of Muslim women's history, the obvious limitation of this book is that it focused primarily on women who were companions of the Prophet, otherwise known as Sahabiyat. If the one in the middle of the picture, which is Al-Muhaddithat, is again a recent contribution by Muhammad Akram Nadwi entitled Women Scholars in Islam, Al-Muhaddithat. This was published in 40 volumes in Arabic, but a single volume summary was first published in English by Interface Publishing in 2007. The book is an excellent scholarly work based on primary sources of hadith and chronicles, identifies 8,000 women who narrated hadith throughout history. Nadawi's book was a game changer amongst books in English language, bringing a rich tradition of female scholarship in Islam to the fore at a time when Muslim women's historical presence continued to be dismissed. Obviously, these female hadith scholars known as muhaddithat were far from detached members of their societies. They were active in the preservation of hadith, which continued to influence how Muslims live today. However, Nadwi's book offers little outside the religious scholarship to address the lack in scholarship surrounding women in the fields of science, medicine, the arts, and management. The one on the right is a recent publication by Aisha Abdurrahman Bewley, The title is Muslim Women, a Biographical Dictionary, published by Taha Publishers in 2004. Yulia extracted the names of predominantly Sufi women from several primary sources, listing them in alphabetical order. While it is an excellent introductory book for English readers who are unaware of the names recorded in classical texts, it actually lacks a basic contextual understanding of the socio-political environment that these women lived in making it difficult for modern readers to place these women in their own social environment. Now, there are a number of other books, academic and popular books, and they have continued to be published. However, each exploring different themes linked to the lives of women in Muslim civilization, but none of them really entirely successful in uncovering the missing names of women's history of science, medicine, arts, and management collectively, while providing readers with panoramic contextual understanding of these individual women. Now, this is really the focus of my talk today. It's a topic which is also the subject of a forthcoming book, which hopefully will be published by our foundation in a couple of months' time. Now, there are millions of unedited manuscripts that might contain a wealth of material on the subject. The primary source that we do have remain as invaluable sources for historians of women in Muslim civilization. To name a few, many classical biographical collections in Arabic devote a section to women, like Volume 8 of the Tabaqat Ibn Sa'd and Al-Sakhawi's Kitab al-Nisa. There also is Kitab al-Aghani by Abu al-Faraj al-Isfahani. It's a major source for singers, vocalists, and chanters. And an excellent modern source is A'lam al-Nisa by Umar Rida Kahala, which has been published in 1987, which consists of 5 volumes listing notable women and is by no means exhaustive. I thought that at this, maybe I could mention here notable Islamic scholars taught by women. The Andalusian scholar Ibn Hazm, whose teachers were mainly women. The other one was Ibn Hajar, who studied with 53 women. And Al-Sakhawi, who had ijazas from 68 women. Al-Suyuti, the famous Suyuti, who studied with 33 women, a quarter of his sheikhs. Now, a number of, although on a much smaller scale, references to women who contributed to the development of science, medicine, and technology do exist. They are, however, isolated and require dedicated research to uncover. The eminence attained by many women during Islamic civilization continues to be unveiled in recent scholarship. There are thousands of women that deserve to be recognized. Some can provide excellent role models to present-day Muslim women who are struggling to navigate through the challenges of present life. Now, the slide that you see, I now like to turn to present some brief prosopographic studies as samples for future research and further investigation on women who excelled in science, medicine, mathematics, arts, and in management. But before I do that, I want to take you on a journey to the 9th century, where my first story begins. In 859 CE, a young lady founded a mosque complex with an educational institution known as Al-Qarawiyyin Madrasa in Fez, Morocco. The complex was endowed when this young lady came into possession of a considerably large inheritance from her merchant father, an inheritance large enough to build a mosque and madrasa. Having lost her husband, brother, and father, this visionary and far-sighted woman set her 20-year-old set her sight on constructing what would become the leading degree awarding institution of her time. Scientists and scholars from around the world flocked to study at this elite educational institution. And if you visit Morocco today, you will still see this building in existence, recognized by UNESCO as the world's oldest continuously operating degree granting university. This young lady was Fatima Al-Fihri, or Fatima Al-Fihriya. Not only did she donate the funds for the construction of the building, but she also project managed it. She project managed the entire building process, but also she restricted the design requirement to ensure that the building material only came from the land of the campus. Due to her devout religious conviction and piety, she launched the project by fasting from the first day until its completion. Some historians say the completion took 13 years. Al-Qarawiyyin University is still awarding degrees, as I've said. Now, in the next part of my talk, I'd like to turn to biographical diagrams of selected women from Muslim civilization. I've divided this to 4 groups, in one group in science, other in medicine, the other in management, and the other in literature. The first name that I would like to consider is Amat Al-Wahid Sutayta Al-Mahamli from Baghdad. Now, she's in the field of science. Sutayta was an unparalleled muhadditha, hadith scholar, faqiha, scholar of Islamic jurisprudence of the Abbasid period. What is incredible about Sutayta is that she did not specialize in one subject alone, but she excelled in many fields such as Arabic literature, hadith, jurisprudence, as well as mathematics. It is said that she was an expert in hisab, arithmetics, and fara'id, successorial calculations, both being practical branches of mathematics, which were well developed in her time. It is said also that she invented solutions to equations which have been cited by other mathematicians. These include equations which denote aptitude in algebra. Due to her combined competence in fiqh and mathematics and inheritance, Sutayta can well be described as an expert witness in our modern terminology. Now, there are numerous other names of scientific women in Muslim civilization who have been forgotten, whose contributions have been disregarded. And a few of these include, I'm talking about scientific women. These include Rayhana bint Al-Hassan. Rayhana bint Al-Hassan Al-Khawarizmi was actually a student of the polymath Abu Rayhan Al-Bayruni. Al-Bayruni wrote his book, Kitab Al-Tafhim, by instruction in the elements of the arts at the request of Rayhana in the city of Ghazna in the year 1029. There is, of course, Lubna of Cordoba in 984. She was a mathematician well-versed in the exact sciences, geometry, algebra, and general literature. She was also a private secretary to the Umayyad Caliph of Islamic Spain, Hakam II. Then we have Boran of Baghdad in 807, born 807. And she was the wife of the Abbasid Khalif Al-Ma'mun, excelled in astrology, used an astrolabe, descendant. She's a descendant of the Nawbakht family, which was also famed astrological family. Then we have Fatima al-Majriti. Fatima al-Majriti, or Fatima of Madrid, is thought to have been an astronomer from 10th century Andalusia. She was the daughter of astronomer and mathematician Maslama al-Majriti. There is, however, some debate surrounding the historical accuracy of the figure of Fatima al-Majriti. Then we have Al-Hakam's astronomer. We don't know her name, but she's well into the books as Al-Hakam's astronomer. She was an astronomer who worked in the palace of the Andalusian Khalifa Al-Hakam al-Mustansir. Mustansir Billah. She was competent in astronomy and the use of astrolabes. Then we have Maryam al-Ajliya of Aleppo and from the 9th to 10th century. She was an astrolabe maker. Al-Ajliya worked in the court of Sayyid al-Dawla in Aleppo in 944 to 96-7. Then we have Maryam al-Zinatiya. She was skillful in the science of chemistry and poetry, was from the famous Zinat Berber Amazighi tribe of Al-Qarawiyin. Then we have Dahma bint Yahya. She was a Zaydi scholar. She resided in the city of Thila in Yemen. She taught Zaydi jurisprudence to her students, but she was also a proficient in various sciences, as she excelled in grammar, usul, logic, astronomy, chemistry, and poetry. Moving on to the field of medicine, we have Al-Hassan bint Abu Ja'far. Now, here is a remarkable example of a medieval Muslim woman of medicine who had a reputation also for being a literary woman while attaining proficiency in the sacred art of reciting the Quran. Al-Hassan bint Abu Ja'far al-Tanjali was a medic, poetess. She was a Quran reciter, famous at her time, and she was a native of Luja or Loja near Granada in Al-Andalus. She would have been alive during the Nasrid dynasty of the late Middle Ages, which made her a contemporary of the Andalusian polymath Ibn al-Khatib and Ibn Khaldun in 1406. Now, Ibn al-Khatib was known to have developed the contagion theory, which is important because it sheds light on al-Hassan's environment and the development in her field at the time. Her father, Ahmed ibn Abdullah al-Tanjali, was also learned in the medical sciences, although his primary profession was working as a judge in Loja. He died because of the Black Death. Now, the names of medical women in Muslim civilization are too many to count. A few of these include Aisha bint al-Jayyar al-Sabtiyya. She was a physician, eloquent in speech, philanthropist. She donated the produce of her large orchard as a perpetual charity. And then you have Sara al-Halabiyya, a physician and a poetess whose compositions were read in the presence of the kings of her time. Yeah, she was a calligrapher as well, who dissolved gold for use as ink. And she was native of Aleppo before migrating to Tunisia during the Berber Hafsid dynasty that ruled over Afriqiya. And we have the women of Banu Zuhr. They were learned family who resided in Sevilla or Ishbilia, in Andalus, in the Iberian Peninsula. They were well known for their excellence as physicians and scholars from the 11th to the 13th century. Their women included Amr bint Abu Marwan ibn Zuhr, who was an expert female physician and the daughter of the famous Ibn Zuhr. She and her daughter as well were experts in the treatment of women in gynecology and obstetrics. They were employed as physicians of the Al-Muwahhideen and the Mu'minid ruler, Abu Yusuf Yaqub al-Mansur. Now we have Zainab of Banu Aud. Now she was a physician from the tribe of Banu Aud. This is, I'm talking about 8th century, during the latter period of the Umayyad dynasty. She was knowledgeable about medical practices and an expert in cures, surgeries, and the treatment of eye pains. Now we have the 7th century Nusayba bint Ka'b. She was a companion of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who was a paramedic. She belonged to the Banu Najjar tribe. It was one of the named Muslim women who provided paramedic nursing services to warriors at the Battle of Uhud in the year 625. She was an early convert to Islam from the Medina Ansar helpers, and she was one of the 2 women and 62 men who witnessed the second pledge of allegiance to the Prophet ﷺ, which is called Bay'at al-Aqaba. Then we have Rufayda al-Islamiyya. She was also a Sahabi. She was a convert to Islam in Medina. She hailed from the Medina tribe of Banu Aslam of the Khazraj tribe confederation. She administered emergency health care in tent setup found for wounded warriors during early Muslim battles. And the tent was inside the Masjid al-Nabawi, the Prophet's mosque. Then we have Asiya, 9th century. Asiya al-Qabila, which means midwife, was a famous, very pious midwife during the Ptolemaic dynasty, who ruled over Egypt and Syria. She was famed with novel techniques for easing the delivery and reducing the pain of the mothers. Now we have Salma of the 7th century. Salma, also nicknamed Rafi', was a 7th century Meccan midwife who delivered the children of the women who were close to the Prophet, peace be upon him. Biographers have recorded that Salma participated alongside the Prophet as a medic during the Battle of Khaybar. Then we have Abu Abdullah al-Kanani's assistant in the 11th century. She was a physician, and she was proficient in medicine, natural sciences, and the knowledge of anatomy, amongst other sciences. In addition to being an intellectual and a reputable writer, she was also a talented calligrapher, also knowledgeable in grammar, language, and porosity. She died in the 11th century. Then we have, perhaps known to you, well-known Al-Shifa bint Abdullah. She was a wise companion of the Prophet, public administration, and she was skilled in public administration and medical skills. She had the title Al-Shifa, the healer, due to her medical knowledge and skills in treating skin diseases. She had medical expertise in treating skin disorders like eczema, labeled al-namla, the ant, by the Arabs at the time, as those stricken by al-namla felt the sensation of an ant crawling into their skin. She was trained, she trained other women in medicine and calligraphy. She was appointed also by Khalifa Umar as Muhtasib of Medina market. Muhtasib is the equivalent of modern health and safety executive officer. Now, in the field of literature, we have Ijtimak Rumaykiya stands out. Now, she is really too long, there's too much on her, but I would like to sort of skip to the details. But she was in Seville, in Al-Andalus, and she was the wife of Al-Mu'tamid ibn Abd Amir, the Amir of Seville, the king of Seville, and she was a famous poetess. I like to actually make a move on quickly. Obviously, one doesn't want to move away without referring to Al-Khansa. Al-Khansa, she was called Tamadir bint Amr ibn al-Harith. She died in 644, and she was in Mecca. Her tribe was from Bani Salim, and really is a touching story that is outside or but I think that still within the field of literature, I would like to talk a bit more about Al-Khansa, in the sense that she was the most celebrated Arab poetess from Mecca. The grief that Al-Khansa suffered from the loss of her two brothers caused her blindness. However, during her Islamic phase of her life, she would also suffer an enormous loss to all the four of her sons, whom she encouraged and dispatched to join the Muslim army for the Battle of Qadisiyah between the Muslims and the Persians in Iraq. During the caliphate of Umar ibn al-Khattab, when the news of the loss of her sons came, she did not grieve. She is reputed to have said, "Praise be to Allah for honoring me with their martyrdom, and I pray that He joins me with them in paradise." She died in the desert in the first year of Rashidun, the Khalifa Uthman ibn Affan. Now, there are numerous literary and artistic women in Muslim civilization who deserve more recognition. Although this list that I show in front of you is by no means exhaustive, some of them include Wallada bint al-Mustakfil, Maryam bint Abu Yaqub al-Ansari, Tamima bint Yusuf, Aisha of Qurtuba, Safiya bint al-Murtada, Shuhda bint al-Ibari, Qamar al-Baghdadiya, and Fatima bint al-Aqra'. Now, each of those have a long story to tell, and I hope that these will be properly given proper attention and given extensive writing in the book, in the forthcoming book. Now, lastly, we have arrived at women in the field of management. One of the most notable and significant contributors to philanthropic works in Muslim civilization has to be Zubaydah, the wife of Harun al-Rashid, the famous fifth Abbasid Caliph. She's particularly remembered for the contributions she made to the ulama and the poor for the series of wells, reservoirs, and artificial pools that provided water for Muslim pilgrims along the route from Baghdad to Mecca and to Medina. And the map that you see there are actually shows this route. It's populated by rest houses, kitchens, wells, and she really has spent years donating and even supervising the buildings along time. But of course, more important is her is a famous water supply that she brought all the way from outside Mecca across the mountain using some very interesting system of water transportation using aqueducts, and to bring water all the way to Mecca. They say that some of the water of Zamzam comes also from there. And this is also called Zubayda's spring, or Nabi' Zubayda. Now, the next name that comes is obviously Fatima al-Fihriya. We've already spoken about her in the beginning, but she appears in obviously in the management zone as well, and I shall skip her. Then you have the, management is not a simple term to define. So here I have selected a number of different roles that women played in Muslim civilization as rulers, kingdoms, philanthropists, and businesswomen. This is not an exhaustive list. We have Shuja al-Khawarizmi. She's known as al-Mustawkil. She was the mother of the Abbasid Khalif al-Mutawakkil, endowed a hospital. You've got Zumurrud Sitt al-Sham Khatun, founded the Madrasa of Al-Shamiyya. You have Zaifa Khatun. She was a queen regent of Ayyub, the Ayyubi Aleppo, and in the 13th century, wife of the Emir ruler of Aleppo, Al-Zahir Ghazi, who was the son of Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi. In addition to being powerful female leader, she has endowed many philanthropic projects, including Al-Firdaus School and Khanka School, located in Mahallat Al-Farafira in Aleppo. You have also Sultana Rajia in 1205 to 1240. She was ruler of Delhi and was the only woman ever to sit on the throne of Delhi in India, of course. Razia's ancestors were Muslims of Turkish descent who came to India in the 11th century. Contrary to custom, her father, Shamsuddin al-Tutmush, selected her over her brothers to be his successor. Then you have Safwat al-Mulk, was a Seljuk princess who most notably created a funerary cupola for her and her son in the early 12th century. This cupola was part of a larger compound west of Damascus that housed a mosque and Sufi hospice. Much like Daifa Khatun, Safwat al-Mulk's patronage centered around religion and Sufism, as was the norm for women patrons of that day. We also got to get to Arwa bint Ahmed al-Sulayhiyya, Fatimid ruler of the Yemen in 1091. And she was known for founding the Queen Arwa Mosque in Jibla, Yemen. You have also Subh al-Muayyad from the women of influence, power, politics, and administration in Andalusia. She was described as the Qarina, which is wife, female consort of Al-Hakam, the Umayyad ruler of Andalusia. There's also Padishah Khatun, a queen of Kerman in Persia during the Kutluk Khanid dynasty, the Sitt al-Mulk, the Fatimid princess, de facto ruler of the state after the disappearance of her half-brother, the Caliph Al-Hakam ibn Amr Allah. Al-Hakim bi-Amri Allah. Then you have Sayyid al-Hurra. Oh, she's great, really. Sayyid al-Hurra, which means the free lady. She was described as a pirate queen of Morocco who managed to control the western half of the Mediterranean over 30 years. She was actually defending the whole area of Morocco on the coast in the Mediterranean. Her family were expelled from Granada in Al-Andalus, now southern Spain, by the forces of Ferdinand and Isabella during the Spanish Reconquista. Then you have Al-Shifa bint Abdullah, whom we have already mentioned, a wise companion, literate in an illiterate time, Muhtasib, market administrator in Medina. Then you also have Samra bint Nuhayk al-Asadiyya in the 7th century. She was a companion of the Prophet. At the time of Khalifa Umar bin Khattab, he employed her as muhtasib on Mecca's market. He gave her a whip to use for punishing cheaters in trading and weighing. Imagine, she has the power of executing the judgment rather than raising the issue into the caliph or into a court. Enormous authorities for given to women. Then you have Jamra al-Attara. She used to be an apocalyptist to Khalifa Abu Ja'far al-Mansur. In addition to this role, she was responsible for the jewelry bank during his caliphs al-Mansur and during the Khalif al-Rashid and during Khalif al-Amin. This was due to her reliability and trustworthiness. Then you have Busra bint Azwan. She was the sister of Utbah ibn Azwan al-Mazini, the famous companion, the governor of Basra. According to the historian, the author of Busra, the author of the reference that I was referring to, Busra hired Abu Huraira, who was a companion, and he was her employee during the time of the Prophet. Later, she married him after Marwan succeeded him as an administrator over Medina. Al-Isaba fi al-Tamiz al-Sahaba is the reference by Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani. Now, I come to one last lady, not least, however, but she really ought to be mentioned. In this category, she deserves a spotlight. This is Muraima bint Ibrahim al-Attar. She was the last Sultana of Granada in Al-Andalus. Muraima's tale is a particularly tragic one, as you may be able to guess from the statue in the image from Loja in South Spain near Granada, which shows her in tears. Now, Muraima was the wife of Abu Abdullah Muhammad, the 12th of Granada, the last ruler of the Nasrid kingdom of Granada, and the daughter of Ibrahim ibn Ali al-Attar, who was the commander of the Granada forces and governor of the city of Loja. Her wedding took place in 1482. Shortly thereafter, she and her husband were imprisoned by her father-in-law. They were liberated by Kingdom of Castile in 1483, but their children were kept as hostages. She did not see her children until after the fall of Granada to the Castilians. What a story. In 1492 was the end of the Muslim era in Andalus, and she was the last queen and the last woman. Her plight must have been enormous, and now there's no time to go into details about her life. But there is actually an interesting popular old Portuguese song which says, "If I have to cry, I must remember Muraima, and if I have to complain, I must remember Muraima." Now, our studies show that throughout early Islam, a caliber of Muslim women emerged who set the tone for excellence in their fields while crucially not neglecting their familial and social societal roles. If they were mothers, they had one thing in common, in my view. They were producers of unique generations. They seem to have stood like a brand. Male and female children were being produced in some sort of standard way, wherever they were in the Muslim land, Muslim world. They were brought up to live in a halal zone. I call it the green zone in our modern terminology. Now, this green zone is sometimes defined as the Tajir zone, because Tajir is four letters in a word, Ta, Alif, Ja, Ra. And it sort of, Ta comes from taqwa, mindful of God. Alif, A comes from amana, trustworthiness. And the J, Jim, which comes from courage, jasara, courage, and the Ra comes from rahma, the mercy. Now, this sort of brand seemed to have become the trend in society when families produce children, particularly, of course, the mother. They tend to sort of bring up children who have taqwa, amana, jasara, and rahma. And of course, this green zone is really very interesting, because it has implications of what we have today. They wouldn't transgress on animals or environmental issues. They wouldn't transgress on social welfare and social problems and so on. So this is sort of my own depiction of how it must have been the safe and just space for humanity in the middle there. That's the green zone. Whilst outside the red zone, which is the sort of so-called like haram or not allowed, these are ecological barriers and also social foundation barriers where one has to avoid, and we have to operate within the green zone. That's the kind of generation after generation, whether they were in Arabia, whether they were in Iraq, Syria, North Africa, whether they were in Spain or India. They seem to have or created an organism of people produced by women, and this organism grows despite the various political problems of governments and the political upheavals, sometimes the corruption of leaders and so on. But Islam was being spread, right, in this way. And therefore, I would say that women were the cogwheels that drove Muslim civilization to flourish when they worked in harmony with men within the halal zone as defined by Islam. Now, I'd like to thank you for giving me the permission to speak to you. I hope it has been useful and entertaining. May Allah be with you, and all the best. Assalamu alaikum.